Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Elizabeth Aaron. It's hard to believe the end of July is almost here. It feels like we're smack dab in the middle of summer. One of my favorite things to do in the summer is to check out the summer blockbusters. And this year it's looking a little different. I'm pretty much relying on, streaming. But lucky for us, a lot of the platforms are trying to bring on some new material. And I'm going to be looking at 3 movies today that are all new in 2020. They are all now on the Netflix platform. And I don't know about you, but lately I've been feeling a little sluggish. So I thought I would spice some things up by looking at some action and adventure movies. And I'd been hearing about The Old Guard in the news, so I thought I would take a look at that movie. It stars Charlize Theron, and I like her a lot, so I was excited to check this one out. That will be my focus in the first segment of the show. In the second segment, I'm going to be taking a look at the movie Spenser Confidential. That stars Mark Wahlberg. And in the third segment of the show, I'll be sharing my thoughts about the movie Extraction with Chris Hemsworth. Something these 3 movies have in common is that they're based on a book or a comic book. So I hope you'll stick around for the last segment of the show, where I will be looking at movies that are out now or will be coming out soon that are based on books or comic books. So let's dive on in. The first movie that I'm going to look at, as I mentioned, is called The Old Guard. It came out on July 10th, and it is on Netflix. It is 2 hours and 5 minutes long. It's considered an action-adventure fantasy, and it is rated R. This movie is based on a comics series. It was written by Greg Rucka, and he also wrote the screenplay for the movie. The comic series is about a team of women warriors. They are essentially immortal, and they have lived for centuries already, and they have fought just about every kind of battle that you could ever think of. Now, the movie is a little bit different, and according to Netflix, the description is 4 undying warriors who've secretly protected humanity for centuries become targeted for their mysterious powers just as they discover a new immortal. And that new immortal is a new member of their mercenary group. This movie is described as gritty and exciting. It was directed by Gina Prince Bythewood. She is an award-winning director and screenwriter. In 2014, she won Best Screenplay at the African American Film Critics Association, and she's been nominated for a number of different prizes, including Best Director over the years for different movies. And she is known for directing the movies Love and Basketball, The Secret Life of Bees, and Beyond the Lights. As I mentioned, it stars Charlize Theron, and she is an Oscar winner. She won the Best Actress in a Leading Role award for the movie Monster back in 2004. And she's known for such movies as The Italian Job, North Country, Hancock, and Snow White and the Huntsman. The movie also stars Chiwetel Ejiofor. He's an English actor, and he won the BAFTA Award for Best Leading Actor for 12 Years a Slave, and he was nominated for an Oscar for that role, and he won the Best Actor Award for the same movie for several other awards contests. He was also in the movies American Gangster, Salt, The Martian, and Doctor Strange. Another actor in this movie is Kiki Layne. She is also an award winner. She won Outstanding Actress in the Black Reel Awards for If Beale Street Could Talk. and she's been in the movies Native Son and Captive State. Before diving into the movie, I just want to mention that, again, this is a rated R movie, and it has violence and gore, and the violence and gore is pretty severe. So that's something just to keep in mind. In fact, there are moments where it just seems like there is a bloodbath going on. For me, this was really over the top. It actually got me thinking more about violence in movies because it was just extreme. I really don't think it was necessary. I think a bunch of this was gratuitous. I get that some of it was for the effects, and at the same time, I think that it was overdone. There has been a lot of exploration about how violence in movies impacts we human beings, and especially on younger people. And I want to read a summary from the Science Daily article. It's called Justified and Unjustified Movie Violence Evokes Different Brain Responses. This came out last December. The source is the Annenberg Public Policy Center of the University of Pennsylvania. And it says, in a study, researchers find that scenes of justified and unjustified violence in movies activate different parts of the adolescent brain. The research is the first to show that when movie characters engage in violence that is seen as justified, there is a synchronized response among viewers in a part of the brain involved in moral evaluation, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, suggesting that viewers see the violent behavior as acceptable for self or family protection. This is powerful information about how we might come to accept violence. So, especially if you have youngsters in the house, or if you plan to watch this late at night, keep it in mind because you may find it disturbing. In diving into telling you about the story of the movie, I want to start by saying that I went into this movie not knowing anything about it. So I was piecing everything together without having read anything about it. I just saw that the name of this movie was in the news a lot. So I was curious about it, and now I am going into the discovery process. So come along with me for this ride. This movie starts with the narration by a character named Andy, played by Charlize Theron. And Andy is short for Andromache the Scythian. And we see her scanning a view of 4 bodies that appear dead. They appear like they have been shot over and over and over with guns. And there's a lot of blood around. And she is reflecting on how she is just sick and tired of this. And then there's a flashback where she is in Morocco and she meets up with 3 other people. And clearly they are old friends. They know each other well. There's something about their relationship that leads me to believe they've been through battle together. Maybe they're undercover agents for the CIA. There's something covert that connects them, but it's not quite clear yet. After they have reconnected in what seems like a safe place, they meet with someone who used to be in the CIA, who is played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, and he asked them if they would be willing to do a mission for them, that there have been a bunch of children who have been kidnapped and need to be rescued, and he believes that Andy and her group of 3 other mercenaries are the right people to do it. They decide that this is in line with their values and that this is a mission they're willing to take. And the mission happens to be in South Sudan. So they get to South Sudan and they do everything they can to go into the place where the girls are supposed to be held. They're getting ready to rescue them. And it becomes clear that things are not quite what they expected to be. There's a lot of shooting that happens. The 4 mercenaries, including Andy, are on the ground. And this is the scene that the movie had opened with the 4 dead bodies there. Then something unusual happens. And if you've read anything about this movie, then you'll know what this is. And I don't want to spoil it, but I'm not sure how to talk about the movie without it. I won't give much away after this. But it turns out these 4 bodies that have been totally blown away with all these gunshots actually start healing and coming back to life. What we learn is that these 4 people are together because what they have in common is this sense that they are ageless. Their bodies keep healing and rehealing, and they can go through anything and they will survive. So essentially they are immortal, or so they believe. If they're not immortal, at the very least they live for a very long time, centuries. And it is this healing and coming back to life that was the whole point of this setup. Copley works for a pharmaceutical company in London, and they wanted proof that these mercenaries who are centuries old existed, because they want to be able to take the DNA and reproduce it so that their longevity can be available to people, and that this is going to be a way to make a lot of money, as well as change how things work in the world. And this is the last thing that these mercenaries want. They want to be covert. They want to stay undercover because this is how they go about doing things in the world. They are there to essentially help things move forward in the world. And they've been through many battles and seen many things and have an amazing historical perspective, which makes them the perfect people to be able to help move things forward in a positive way in the world. After this incident happens, the four of them are together and they each start having some visualizations. And these come from, as it turns out, a Marine who is based in Afghanistan. And they are coming to understand she is one of them. She has the same qualities. And we get to see a whole series of events that happen in Afghanistan to help the audience recognize what the similarities are between her and this group of mercenaries. So 2 and 2 are tied together. And eventually, Andy goes to find her and take her to this group of mercenaries. She's resistant at first, she doesn't understand what's going on, but over time, as she experiences what this group is about, she starts seeing why she fits in. The next part of the plot is all about whether or not this company that Copley works for is going to get them. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail because I don't want to spoil it for you, but eventually there is some level of showdown around, will the mercenaries get to stay covert, and will they get to continue to do the things that they feel they are actually on the planet to do? And within all this, there are a good number of scenes where, as I mentioned before, there is some major violence. This movie will get your adrenaline going. And if you don't like the sight of blood, this movie is probably not for you. Gruesome violence keeps happening on an ongoing basis. It seems the favorite weapon for Andy is, I believe it's a battle axe. It's on a rod, it looks circular, and yet all of them are also well-versed in using guns. And it seems people who are just in their way are just like objects, that they themselves don't have any meaning or any purpose, any families. There just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of consequence for the deaths that happen. And frankly, I do find that disturbing. Also, there are some neat effects on the movie. You see a wild ride on a plane happen. When death is no longer a possibility, it opens up all kinds of options for different things to happen that never in your normal life would you expect you'd be willing to even try. And if you're a fan of the Netflix series called Sense8, I definitely see some parallels between those two, because there's some kind of telepathy that happens that's similar. At the same time, other than the effects, ultimately this story is pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. I don't find there's a lot of there, not a lot of substance. For me, it was more a spectacle to watch and a way to put myself inside the shoes of these characters who have lived for centuries, so that you have a sense of what that could possibly be like. But in the scheme of things, not a whole lot actually happens. It seems to me that most of this movie is about setting some kind of foundation so that there can be a sequel or two or more, or maybe some kind of television series. I'm not sure exactly what's going to be coming out of this. Based on what's happening now with the pandemic, I suspect that it is probably going to be some time before any kind of sequel will come out for this movie. I felt that the acting was quite good, it was convincing. However, the character that is the nemesis seems to get greedier and greedier as time goes on, as he thinks about the possibilities of what may come from having this group of mercenaries. And he becomes more cartoonish as the movie goes on, and I actually felt it should have gone the other direction, that maybe he started out being a bit cartoonish, but then got more realistic about what could come from this relationship that he's trying to forge. The story just felt a bit contrived when it came to him. They didn't even try to work with these four to see what possibilities might exist in being able to check out their DNA. He was just very forceful with them. It just didn't seem necessary. And while I didn't really find any holes in the story, as I said, it was quite a simple story, and granted it's based on a comic series, so it makes a lot of sense that it would be that way. But for such a violent movie, I felt there needed to be something more substantial going on, something more to fight for. If the beginning had showed this group of mercenaries doing what they do, which is really to set out and ultimately help people, and then show them getting caught, it might have held more water for me. I felt Charlize Theron did a good job of being the lead. She easily kept my attention, and I liked how the other characters represented a diverse cast and the diversity of our population. And I think it's interesting how the original comic series had a group of all women mercenaries, and in this case, at least at the very beginning, there's only one woman and the rest are men. I'm curious about that decision, especially since the writer of the comic series was also the writer of the screenplay. Perhaps they thought this would be more attractive for the audiences, or maybe they already had a cast picked out and they had to write according to that. Those are just a couple of hypotheses. In any case, did I like the movie? It was entertaining. The only thing that's really going to be super memorable to me about it is the violence. And for me, that is really unfortunate. If and when there is a sequel to this movie, I honestly don't think this movie captivated me enough to want to see the sequel, especially if it means going through and viewing a lot of violence again. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being an absolutely fantastic movie, I would give this movie maybe a 4.5. I wish I could give it more. It has a lot of potential, and it has great actors attached to it, but I just can't reconcile it based on the story and the violence. Now stay tuned for the next segment of the show when I'll be looking at the movie Spenser Confidential after the break.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. It keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Thanks for joining the second segment of the show. In the last segment, I talked about the movie The Old Guard. I'm now going to discuss the movie Spenser Confidential. This movie is based loosely on a novel called Wonderland. It's by Ace Atkins, and this novel came out in 2013. Spenser Confidential came out on March 6th of this year. It's considered an action film, but it also has comedy and crime connected to it. It's an hour and 51 minutes, and it is rated R. This movie is directed by Peter Berg. He has directed a number of episodes of different TV series, including The Leftovers and Friday Night Lights, and he has directed the movies Deepwater Horizon, Patriots Day, and Mile 22. This movie stars Mark Wahlberg. He has been nominated for 2 Academy Awards, one in 2011 for Best Motion Picture of the Year for The Fighter, and one for Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role for the movie The Departed. He's known for the movies Three Kings, The Perfect Storm, Date Night, Lone Survivor, and All the Money in the World. The actor Winston Duke is also in this movie. He's been on a number of television shows, including Law and Order Special Victims Unit and Major Crimes, as well as Modern Family. And as far as movies go, he's been in Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, and Us. And he is an award winner having won Outstanding Performance by a Cast in a Motion Picture for Black Panther, and that's a Screen Actors Guild Award. And then for the Black Reel Awards, he won for Outstanding Breakthrough Performance for a Male for Black Panther. And this movie stars Alan Arkin. He has won an Oscar for Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role for the movie Little Miss Sunshine, and he's been nominated for many other different awards. Besides a lot of television, he's been in the movies Edward Scissorhands, Glengarry Glen Ross, Grosse Pointe Blank, Argo, and Get Smart. And also in this movie is the actor Eliza Schlesinger. She has a lot of writing credits to her name and has been in the movies Paradise and Instant Family. So I want to mention that, like The Old Guard, this movie is rated R. It also has quite a bit of violence. This violence is different. And I say that because Mark Wahlberg's character Spenser is mostly fighting to defend himself. And also there's a comedic angle that comes out about the fighting that takes place in this movie. Some of it is disturbing, but it is a bit easier to take than it is in The Old Guard. There's a lot of fist fighting in this, and it seems like it's done on a more human level and for more human reasons. Still, if you have younger people in the home, and if you want to have a good night's sleep and violence can affect your sleep, you probably want to watch this early in the day and keep the youngsters away. Netflix describes this film as Spenser, an ex-cop and ex-con, teams up with aspiring fighter Hawk to uncover a sinister conspiracy tied to the deaths of 2 Boston police officers. The movie starts out where we get to see Mark Wahlberg, as Spenser, approaching the home of a police chief. He has some information on the chief, and he wants the chief to do the right thing, and when the chief refuses, he ends up beating up the chief, and that lands him in prison for 5 years. Next, we see him in Walpole State Prison's library. He's looking into what he's going to do next, considering becoming a truck driver and moving to Arizona. He has just about completed his 5 years and is going to be let out soon. And in the library, he's confronted by a few people who are threatening him. They don't want him to stay in Boston. We don't yet know why, and we don't yet know who has sent them to threaten him. But we learn right away that Spenser has a chip on his shoulder, he's not scared of a good fight, he's got a mean sense of humor, and no one's going to get in his way of doing what he feels is the right thing. Next, we see him get out of prison, and who should pick him up but his friend Henry, who's played by Alan Arkin. We learn later that Henry owns a gym, and he has boxing rings, and people are training to be fighters at his gym. We don't know how long Spenser and Henry have known each other, but we have a sense that they know each other really well. After the two connect just outside of the prison, this car comes racing forward, making this grand entrance, and Spenser is telling Henry, "Get back in the car," and he wants to take off really fast because he recognizes who's in the other car. It is his ex-girlfriend. She's very angry that she heard from somebody else that Spenser was getting out and that he did not inform her himself. Now, just as Spenser is getting out of prison, and people may be suspecting that he's carrying some vengeance for having been in prison for 5 years, the police chief whom Spenser had beat up, as well as another officer who Spenser knew was to be a good guy, both get killed. And while Spenser has dreams of moving to Arizona and becoming this truck driver, between his curiosity and wanting to clear the name of the police officer who had been killed and is being scapegoated as the one who was responsible for the murder of the police chief, Spenser just can't let it go. Meanwhile, he is set up to stay at Henry's house, only to find out when he arrives that he has a roommate. The roommate's name is Hawk, and he is an aspiring fighter who can't quite control his temper in the boxing ring, yet otherwise he's a sweet, mild-mannered person who likes salads and eating fresh food. He breaks all kinds of stereotypes. All of the characters are well-rounded and each have their own unique qualities. For example, for Spenser, besides being kind of cocky, he keeps getting into fights and getting beaten up. He's just a glutton for punishment, though it seems that this is not an anomaly. This is just how he goes through life. It's kind of a way of life for him to be beat up and have to heal. But we learn that he has a high tolerance for pain, and that actually serves him really well. And Henry has his quirks. His favorite thing to eat is hot dogs, and he has them all the time. No matter where they go out to eat, he's going to have a hot dog, even when someone else is eating a fantastic gourmet dish. And though he's older, Henry is quite with it, yet he plays the old card pretty well when he has to. Now Sissy, Spenser's ex-girlfriend, she is a riot. She has a mouth on her. She speaks loudly. She doesn't care about anyone hearing. She's also very much into her sexuality, and she has no need to hide it. There's actually an hilarious, intimate scene between Spenser and Sissy in a restaurant bathroom. You may either laugh out loud at it, or you might find it a little offensive, or a bit of both. And Sissy's thing is dogs. She's a dog groomer, and she loves dogs. And she keeps trying to break up with Spenser and never seems to quite succeed. Each of these characters are so well crafted and so well acted that you just fall in love with them. And something I'm personally drawn to, being originally from Massachusetts and this movie taking place in Boston, is there is a particular kind of sense of humor that's a Boston sense of humor, and it comes out in this movie. You've seen it in movies like Good Will Hunting. It has this sarcastic element and sort of this put-down element, but everybody knows that it's in pure fun. And in this movie, it's a great counterbalance to the heavy weight of all of the murders and the darkness that is happening. And to share a little bit more about Spenser, so here he was a cop. He was put in prison. He's now out of prison. He's no longer a cop. And yet he can't keep himself from getting involved. He has some ideas based on his past history as a cop about what may be lurking underneath these two murders of officers. And he is fearless. He just keeps going in deeper and deeper and deeper, closer to trouble, closer to threats, closer to danger, because he knows doing that is going to be the right thing. It's going to lead to the truth, and it's going to clear a good cop's name. I've seen other movies like this before, and what I've experienced before is I get so caught up in all of the different details coming from different places that I'm confused, and I can't always piece together what is happening. This movie was very clear. Spenser is following clues. He's checking out information. We get a new piece of information that we can tie to something else. We're going through this investigation with him every step of the way. And we want him to succeed. And, even more, the stakes get higher and higher, and we're wondering if he can succeed. He's got so much stacked up against him, including practicing as if he is a private investigator, and he does not have a license to do that, nor is he qualified to do that, considering he's just gotten out of prison. Something else that keeps me on my toes is wondering if Spenser can hold out. He has this cockiness about him, and he feels he can hold his own, and you just wonder at what point is he not going to succeed? At what point is he going to be humbled? Or is he going to humble somebody else? There's constantly a vying for power among the characters, and a question about who is actually going to be the one that comes out on top. This movie is pretty much dominated by men, though it is a diverse cast. There are two women in the movie, though. There's Sissy, and then there's the wife of the good cop that gets killed, and both women are very strong. The good cop's wife is more vulnerable. She's just had this major loss, and now she's raising her son by herself. She has reason to be more scared and has never quite been in anything like this before. Meanwhile, Sissy, it seems like she has been around the block, and she isn't going to take anything from anyone. And with all these men who are fighters, who are cops, who are risk takers, nobody can hold a candle to her. She is the one who is totally in power and won't take anything from anyone. Another thing that's a little bit funny about this movie is that there is this theme of dogs and actually cats as well. Spenser has a pet dog that Henry has been looking after. He is so excited to see her when he gets out of prison, and she ignores him. But then once he finds out he has this roommate, Hawk, well, his dog has now befriended Hawk. Spenser gets very jealous. But later there's a scene where there is a ferocious dog that goes after Spenser. And at one point we see how he deals with all the dogs that are over at Sissy's house. And then Henry eats hot dogs. There's just a lot of humor tied to the dogs. And there's also a cat reference. This one's a little gory, tied up in a murder, so I'll just leave it for you to check it out. But it is quite symbolic. As the story gets deeper and deeper, it seems like Spenser is getting into fights that are harder and harder on him. But all this culminates into some final fight scenes at the finale. And Spenser needs to come up with a plan that is going to surprise the bad guys. And I would say that he pretty much succeeds. Not only does he surprise the bad guys, but he surprises the audience. I hadn't put two and two together about what he was going to do, and when he did it, it made complete sense about the choice that he made and how he came about to do it. I consider myself pretty good at figuring out things that are going to happen before they happen in a movie, and this one I did not catch. I love it when a script actually tricks me, and it succeeded in this. What we also learned towards the end is just how skilled a fighter Spenser is. I'll just leave it at that, and when you get to see the movie, you'll see what I'm talking about. The acting in this movie was really great. This kind of ensemble cast worked great together. It looked like they were having fun. They kept surprising each other, demonstrating that they had some level of history together, even though we hadn't necessarily seen the history before. They had an excellent rapport with each other. And I just kept thinking, they were probably as good friends off set as they were on set. It just seemed like they were having a blast together. I also like how this story unfolded. There was a lot of variety between Spenser having his investigation and meeting different people along the way, but then there was also the angle of all the relationships that Spenser had because he just got out of prison after 5 years and he was reconnecting with people, and you got to have a sense of what his life was like. This movie could easily have fallen into a stereotypical formula, but because the characters were so well drawn, because there was great humor, and because you could follow the steps that Spenser was taking and why, and what it was leading to, there's actually quite a bit of uniqueness to this movie. I think a lot of it really comes down to the great acting, and probably some great direction as well. The editing probably had something to do with it too. I'm curious if the editing followed exactly the way the script was written, or if the editor pieced it together in a way to help the story build. Either way, I think it worked really well. And an irony that I really appreciated about this movie is that the guys who were in prison are the ones who are putting away the guys who are supposed to be good. It was funny how those two different roles kind of flipped, and that'll be fun for you to look out for if you watch the movie. And there is an open question, will Spenser actually finally become a truck driver and move to Arizona? I'm not going to spoil it for you. So ultimately, there's a lot that I really liked in this movie. And again, I would say the need for the violence and some of the graphic material, not necessary, but this time I could give it more of a pass. Between the reasons for the violence and the humor, it felt a little bit more justified than in the old guard. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a most excellent, fantastic movie, I'd give this one a 7. It was super entertaining, a lot of fun. High art? No. But it could be a great date movie, a good way to spend a Saturday night. Stay tuned for the next segment of the show when I'll be looking at the movie Extraction after the break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome to the third segment of the show. I am your host, Elizabeth Aaron. In the last segment, I talked about the movie Spenser Confidential, and now I'm going to talk about the movie Extraction. Extraction, like the other movies, is based on another piece of work. In this case, it was based on a graphic novel. It was written by John Russo, who is the co-director of Avengers Endgame. The movie Extraction is considered an action and adventure movie and also a thriller. It came out on April 24th of this year. It's rated R, and it's an hour and 56 minutes long. The movie was directed by Sam Hargrave, and he is actually an award winner mostly for doing stunts. And before doing this movie, he mostly had directed short films. For the most part, actor Chris Hemsworth carries this movie. He has been nominated for many awards, and he won in 2017 as the favorite movie actor for the movie Ghostbusters. That was for the Kids' Choice Awards USA. He has starred in such movies as Star Trek, Thor, The Avengers, and 12 Strong. In this movie, he plays the character Tyler Rake. Also in the movie is the actor Rudraksh Jaiswal. He was in a TV series, it looks like it was Indian, called Mahabharat, and he also starred in the movie Noor. Before diving into this movie, once again, I want to talk about how this has an R rating. The R rating is said by Netflix to be for strong bloody violence throughout, language, and brief drug use, and that is all very true. Now, the three movies that I watched that I'm reviewing today, I watched in the order in which I am reviewing them. So I thought The Old Guard was bloody. Wait till you see this movie. It makes complete sense that the director, Sam Hargrave, is mostly known for his stunt work. The stunts are incredible, and I would say there's blood and gore in at least half the scenes, if not more. In many ways, this movie felt almost like an intense video game than it did a movie that had real human beings in it. There was only caring for the guys that we ended up learning about that are on a particular team. Everyone else was expendable. They were just objects in the way. This was really upsetting for me. It seemed to teach the lesson the only way to get what you want is just to kill people, dispose of them. I just don't think that's a valuable lesson to teach. So now going into the movie, you have a sense of where I'll be coming from. Netflix's description of this movie is, a hardened mercenary's mission becomes a soul-searching race to survive when he's sent to Bangladesh to rescue a drug lord's kidnapped son. That is pretty accurate, although I would say small on the soul-searching, big on the rescuing. The movie starts not unexpectedly with Chris Hemsworth's character, Tyler Rake, in a gunfight on a bridge. A bullet has hit his leg, and he's now on the ground, crawling. And he reloads his gun, and he's bleeding, and then he seems to have some kind of memory. There's a scene, it's a fuzzy image, and it's hard to tell if it's a woman or a child, but it's on a beach somewhere. From there's a flashback to 2 days ago, and we are now in Mumbai, India. A bell rings at a high school, and a group of kids comes out. There is a chauffeured car that picks up several boys, and they go to an outside cafe and hang out. One of the boys is interested in a girl, and the two others are trying to convince him to approach her and possibly ask her out. After the outing, a chauffeured car drops him off at this amazing building. It's hard to tell quite what it is. He enters, there's a long, broad hallway. It appears to be more of an institution than a home. And then he sees a big room that has a glass wall with people inside, and then a man approaches him at the door, asks him where he's been, and says, "Hasn't your father told you that you need to come straight home after school?" We come to learn that the boy is Ovi. He is the son of a drug lord, and the man is Saju. He appears to be the drug lord's right-hand man, and as it turns out, the drug lord is in prison. He knows that his son is in danger of being kidnapped. But of course, the son is tired of being cooped up, of having a very limited life, and he does what any teenager does, which is sneak out or go against the rules. So that night, he does sneak out, and he meets his friends at a club, and guess what happens? He does get kidnapped. It's his worst nightmare. It's his father's worst nightmare. Because chances are he is being kidnapped by another drug lord who is in competition with the drug lord that is in prison. and Ovi is in great danger. Next, we zoom over to Australia, and we see 3 men together. One is just sleeping on the ground, and then there are 2 others. One of them stands at the edge of a cliff, and he's looking down below at the water, and he is scared. He says it's at least a 30-meter jump, and he's pretty much not willing to do it. But then Chris Hemsworth seems to wake up. He takes a sip of a beer. He hands the beer to someone, asks them just to hold it for a while, and suddenly he jumps over the cliff. He does not have any qualms about anything that seems dangerous. He is just a man of complete courage. And once he's in the water, he stays underneath the water. It's hard to know at first if he is trying to pull some kind of prank on the 2 guys, looking down to see if maybe he was killed and he wants to hide from them. But eventually we learn that this is just something that he does. He is a master at trying to trick people and to do the unexpected. The next thing we know, he's in a vehicle driving to a kind of cottage, and he greets a dog there, and there's a woman there, and he says she should make herself at home. She seems to be of Indian descent, and she has come here to ask him for his help. She tells him about Ovi, how he's been taken hostage in Dhaka. So Talga Reich mentions, well, what about Gaspar? He's in Dhaka. Gaspar apparently is a special ops person like he is, and he's already based in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. But for one reason or another, he is not available, and Reich decides that he'll do it. He says he needs the money. And now we get to the first hole in the movie. Unless I misunderstood, they have 16 hours to get this boy out of his hostage situation, and the woman who has come to ask Reich to do this job said that she will meet him the next morning. And I looked it up, and it's going to be at least 7 to 9 hours of plane travel just to get to Bangladesh, so right away this doesn't quite add up. In any case, Reich gets there, and there's just one fight scene after another. We also get to know the drug lord who has taken Ovi captive, and he is very mean. He has no qualms about hurting children or threatening them to hurt themselves. We see Reich break into where the captive is held, take the boy, and then follow an escape plan. Well, the plan falls through, and it looks like this drug lord has a whole army of people available to do his bidding. Only there is a twist, and I don't want to give it away because it's a good one. Suffice it to say that not only do we have the drug lord's army, but there's also someone who appears to be on Ovi's side who is trying to take Ovi. So suddenly Reich is fighting somebody who is an ally to get Ovi. And it takes some figuring out to understand what the different motivations are here. And that helps make this movie interesting. Soon what ensues is a crazy road race. The streets of Dhaka are windy and thin, and not only do we have this ally who's chasing after them, but we also have this army, and it's just a great big confusing mess, but it's also fun in a lot of ways. You just don't know who's going to show up where, and who's going to get the advantage. Meanwhile, though, back to the violence, there is a lot of death, a lot of blood, a lot of disregard for human life. It seems all that matters is getting Ovi out, and everybody else is just expendable. And I just really feel this sends the wrong message. In the midst of all of these different chases and violent scenes, there are moments where Ovi and Reich get to hang out together, and they get to know each other. Ovi shows himself to be a smart, contemplative, insightful kid. He thinks about things, and he does care about other people. He talks about how his father, being a drug lord, has also killed people. And he is trying to reconcile for himself how this can be, why it is, and what he feels comfortable with himself. And Talga Reich is a very different kind of person than it seems he's ever met before. Ovi begins to trust him and wants to dig deeper and understand more of what his motivations are. And Reich ends up showing quite a bit of vulnerability, which seems surprising. And this way there is more character depth than I expected based on the kind of character that Reich is. Someone who seems to kill without conscience. And he reveals things about himself. He talks about, well, is he a courageous person or not? And about how someone appears is not necessarily how someone actually is. And Ovi shows himself to be someone with depth, someone who can see forgiveness, and understand someone else's pain. Well, not surprisingly, at some point, Avi and Rake get into trouble and they need help, and they reach out to Gaspar. Even though it seems this isn't a good idea, Gaspar is the person who they can probably trust the most. He's a known quantity, and he's someone that Rake had a relationship with in the past. Yet in another twist, things go sour with Gaspar. And I was actually excited to see that Gaspar was played by David Harbour. If you're a Stranger Things fan, you've seen him as Jim Hopper, who is the sheriff in that show. Now, frankly, I think he was poorly cast in this role. He has too sweet a demeanor to play somebody who could be a killer. That's in my humble opinion. In any case, the clock is ticking, the stakes are high, and soon there is this end rush to get Ovi out. Often it seems like the drug lord in Dakar is winning. He has his army, this is all taking place on his territory, he has the whole city blocked off. It seems not only is he a drug lord, but he is almost like the president of this city. I don't know if there's any other political people here, but it certainly doesn't seem so. I mean, he has a colonel who's available to him. He has lots of special ops kind of people who are very talented. He has armies of children helping him out. It's just unbelievable. The movie ultimately culminates when they have to figure out a way to get Ovi across this bridge over a river. Once on the other side, he's pretty much assured of safety. The thing about this bridge, though, is that traffic has been completely stopped. Most of the drivers are out of their cars, they've abandoned them, they're left haphazardly across this bridge. There's plenty of the enemy on the bridge, plenty of enemy that can enter the bridge. There are people out on the sidelines ready to be snipers. It makes me think of that saying, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Well, this is one bridge that is quite a tall order. Every second, something from out of left field can happen, and you're just waiting with anticipation to see, are they going to make it? This is also where the beginning of the movie had started, where Tyler Rake had been hit in the leg with a gunshot, and his body has just taken quite a beating over the last few hours trying to rescue Ovi. So that piece is just one whole other obstacle to the success of getting Avi to safety. So the acting in this is pretty good. I believed the characters, I believed their roles and who they were. I was engaged. Chris Hemsworth does a good job of being this sensitive, tough guy. I think he succeeds at having these two parts that are opposite kind of come together. At the same time, there is this question of somebody being so sensitive inside being able to actually accomplish what he does. And I'm not sure that the movie reconciled this within his personality. Of all the characters in the movie, I think I appreciated Avi the most. He was put in the hardest of circumstances, and he is definitely a sensitive kid who takes in everything that's around him. And he's kind of the grounding force in terms of creating a reality check of what is really going on. In terms of the story, I talked about one hole about the tying earlier, and there were a few other holes here too. There is a point later in the movie where the drug lord has a photo of Tyler Rake, and I was scratching my head about how he got that picture. He was sitting in a car. He was not accessible to anything electronic. Did he have a printer in the car? It just didn't make any sense. There were also moments where it would cut to a certain scene, and it wasn't clear how they necessarily got to that scene. And there's a point where Tyler and Avi are in a sewer, and it smells to high heaven. And so they discuss this in the moment, but then when they leave there, their clothes are soaked in this sewage, and there's very little discussion about this. And it seems to me like it should have been a bigger deal. I'll also point out that this is pretty much a male-dominated movie. There is the woman who approaches Rake, and it turns out she herself is a trained operative, and it makes me wonder why she wasn't the one who carried out the plan and why she needed Rake to do it. And then we get to see Saju's wife. But other than that, it's a world of men. And it seems to me that this movie is much less about story than it is about special effects, about the fighting scenes. It seems to me that the producers of this movie knows who the audience is, and they are gearing it probably towards younger men. I know I've brought up violence a few times already, but it just seems to me that obstacles don't need necessarily to be people, and that showing strength and overcoming adversity can be done in other ways than just killing people as if they are objects. In this movie, only the people who were central to the story were the people that seemed to matter. And I think that's a really dangerous message. And in that way, I don't condone this movie. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a most excellent, fabulous movie, I would give this a 3. I don't feel the story was super strong, and I don't like that there's a lot of violence sort of stuck in my head as a result of watching this movie. If you are interested in martial arts, doing stunt work, and finding ways to get out of a difficult situation, this probably will be of some interest to you. But it does have the potential to be quite disturbing. And do I feel changed or better having had seen this movie? No, I don't. Enough said. Now stay tuned for the final segment of the show when I'll be sharing 20 new or upcoming movies that are based on books, comics, or other material.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome to the final segment of the show. In the prior segment, I looked at the movie Extraction. In this segment, I'll be sharing 20 new or upcoming movies that are based on books, comics, or other material. One of my favorite things to do is to read a book and then see the movie. Usually, I like to do it in that order. I'm just fascinated at the creativity and the different perspectives that people can bring. And I like the challenge of seeing how closely a director or someone who wrote a script envisions a story based on what happens in my own imagination when I read that story. I also like to see how actors interpret certain characters. In the 3 movies that I reviewed earlier in the show, I actually had not realized those were based on books until I saw the movies and researched. In the movies that I'm going to talk about, I'm happy to know in advance that these are based on books and other material, so I have a chance to check it out first. I hope that this is something that you might enjoy doing as well. The first group that I'm going to be talking about are already made into movies that you can see now. First on my list is Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. And this is based on the book Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn. And this actually appears to be a DC comic, and the authors are Amanda Conner and Jamie Palmiotti. The movie is available now on the digital platform, and to give you a synopsis, directly from this movie's website, it says, "You ever hear the one about the cop, the songbird, the psycho, and the mafia princess? Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn is a twisted tale told by Harley herself, as only Harley can tell it. When Gotham's most nefariously narcissistic villain, Roman Sionis, and his zealous right hand, Zaj, put a target on a young girl named Cass, the city is turned upside down looking for her. Harley, Huntress, Black Canary, and Renee Montoya's paths collide, and the unlikely foursome have no choice but to team up to take Roman down." The movie stars Margot Robbie, Elizabeth Winstead, Rosie Perez, Chris Messina, Ewan McGregor, and Ella J. Basco, and is directed by Kathy Yan. The next movie is called To All the Boys, P.S. I Still Love You. This came out in February of this year. It's a sequel to the movie that came out in 2018 called To All the Boys I've Loved Before, and it's based on the book series To All the Boys I've Loved Before that was written by Jenny Han. It's a romantic comedy, and the Internet Movie Database describes it as Lara Jean and Peter have just taken their relationship from pretend to officially official when another recipient of one of her old love letters enters the picture. It stars Lara Condor, Noah Centineo, and Jordan Fisher. And this is now streaming on Netflix. Next up is the movie called The Willoughbys, which is based on a book by the same name by Lois Lowry. This came out in April of this year. It's on Netflix. It's an hour and a half, and it's an animation and adventure comedy. According to the Internet Movie Database, The summary is, convinced they'd be better off raising themselves, the Willoughby children hatch a sneaky plan to send their selfish parents on vacation. The siblings then embark on their own high-flying adventure to find the true meaning of family. And it stars Will Forte, Maya Rudolph, and Alicia Cara. It also has Terry Crews, Martin Short, and Ricky Gervais. Next is the movie called The Turning. This is based on Henry James's book, The Turning of the Screw. And currently this is available on Vudu, YouTube, and Fandango Now. It is considered a horror, mystery, and drama. It came out in January. It's rated PG-13, and according to the Internet Movie Database, it's about a young governess who is hired by a man who's become responsible for his young nephew and his niece after their parents' deaths. It's directed by Floria Sigismondi, and it stars Mackenzie Davis, Finn Wolfhard, Brooklyn Prince, and Joey Richardson. Next is the movie called Just Mercy. This is based on a book by the same name by Brian Stevenson. The book is described as a story of justice and redemption. This movie can be seen on Amazon Prime. It came out in January of this year. It's considered a biography and a crime drama. It's a longer movie. It's 2 hours and 17 minutes. And the description on the Internet Movie Database says, world-renowned civil rights defense attorney Brian Stevenson works to free a wrongly condemned death row prisoner. It's directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, and it stars Michael B. Jordan, Jamie Foxx, and Brie Larson. I personally am very excited about this movie. I actually saw previews to it in the theaters back in the fall, and both Brie Larson and Jamie Foxx are Academy Award winners. Michael B. Jordan has been nominated for a number of roles. This just looks like it's going to be one big class act movie, and super relevant with all the Black Lives Matter protests that are going on now. Next on my list is the movie called The Call of the Wild. This is an adventure novel by Jack London. It was published way back in 1903, and it's set in the Yukon in Canada. It is a classic story, and it is centered around a dog named Buck. This movie came out in February. It is available on Amazon Prime. It's an adventure, drama, and family movie. It's an hour and 40 minutes long. It's directed by Chris Sanders, and it stars Harrison Ford, Omar Sy, and Kara G. This movie has a lot of special effects in it, and I saw the previews also in the fall, and it looks terrific. Very heartwarming. Oh, and I'll also mention that besides Amazon, it looks like this movie is available on Google Play and Fandango Now. Next on the list is the film Artemis Fowl. This is based on a book also called Artemis Fowl, The Secret World. And the novel came out in 2001. It was written by an Irish author named Ewan Colfer. This movie came out in June on Disney+. It's an adventure family fantasy movie, and it's rated PG. It's directed by Kenneth Branagh. So that's exciting. Kenneth Branagh is just such a great director and actor, and that he's doing this for Disney, that's a surprise for me. It stars Ferdia Shaw, Lara McDonnell, and Josh Gad. And it also stars Colin Farrell. According to the Internet Movie Database, Artemis Fowl is a young criminal prodigy, and he hunts down a secret society of fairies to find his missing father. And as it turns out, the next movie on my list is also directed by Kenneth Branagh. This movie is called Death on the Nile, and it's due out in late October. It's a crime drama mystery. It's based on an Agatha Christie novel featuring her character Hercule Poirot, and this is a follow-up to the 2017 film, also directed by Branagh, Murder on the Orient Express. Among the cast are Gal Gadot, Armie Hammer, and Rose Leslie. And it also stars Annette Bening. And from what I can see, it is not necessarily going to be available for streaming. It looks like 20th Century Studios is hoping still for a theatrical release out in the movie theaters. Another movie that's coming up based on a novel is Chemical Hearts. This is based on the novel Our Chemical Hearts by Crystal Sutherland. This is an American romantic drama, and it's directed by Richard Tan. And this one's coming up soon. It is expected to be on Amazon Prime starting August 21st. And this movie is rated R. This is a story about a first love, which happens when a high school student transfers to a new school and begins to work on the school's newspaper. It stars Lily Reinhart, Austin Abrams, and Sarah Jones. And the classic sci-fi book Dune is being made into a feature movie. This science fiction novel is by Frank Herbert, and this movie is expected to be released in December of this year. It's an adventure, drama, and of course sci-fi. According to the Internet Movie Database, it's about the son of a noble family who is entrusted with the protection of the most valuable asset and most vital element in the galaxy. The director is Denis Villeneuve, and it stars Rebecca Ferguson, Zendaya, and Jason Momoa. And other names in the film that you might be familiar with are Josh Brolin, Javier Bardem, Charlotte Rampling, Stellan Skarsgård, Oscar Isaac. It just has a powerhouse cast. The next movie I'm going to talk about is based on the novel The Devil All the Time. This is a debut novel. It was written by Donald Ray Pollock, and it came out in 2011. This is a post-World War II story. It's set in the 1960s, taking place in southern Ohio. And the description on the Internet Movie Database is that it's bizarre, compelling, and mentally disturbed people who suffer from the war's psychological damages. It is a drama thriller. It's due out on September 16th, so not too long from now. It's a longer movie. It's 2 hours and 18 minutes. It's rated R. Although the story sounds kind of dark, the novel had gotten good reviews. It is directed by Antonio Campos, and it stars Harry Melling, Riley Keough, Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, and Bill Skarsgård, and you should be able to see it on Netflix. The next movie on the list is The Invisible Man. This is based on H.G. Wells's book that came out in 1897. This movie came out in February of this year. It's a horror mystery sci-fi. It's just over 2 hours. It's rated R, and it can be seen on Amazon Prime. According to the Internet Movie Database, the description is, when Cecilia's abusive ex takes his own life and leaves her his fortune, she suspects his death was a hoax. As a series of coincidences turn lethal, Cecilia works to prove that she is being hunted by somebody nobody can see. And this stars Elizabeth Moss, Oliver Jackson Cohen, Harriet Dyer, and Aldous Hodge. The director is Lee Whannell. Another movie that's coming out quite soon, in fact it should be out around September 4th on Netflix. It's called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This is based on a novel by Canadian writer Ian Reid. It came out originally in 2016. This is a drama, horror, thriller movie. It's long. It's 2 hours and 14 minutes. It's rated R. According to the Internet Movie Database, full of misgivings, a young woman travels with her new boyfriend to his parents' secluded farm. Upon arriving, she comes to question everything that she thought she knew about him and herself. This stars Toni Collette, Jesse Plemons, and Jessie Buckley, and is directed by Charlie Kaufman. The next movie I'm going to talk about is directed by Ron Howard. It's called Hillbilly Elegy, and it's based on a memoir by J.D. Vance, and the memoir is called the same name, Hillbilly Elegy. This is a drama. It is expected out this November. It's just about 2 hours long, and it will be available on Netflix. And according to Netflix, this movie is about a Yale law student, and he is drawn back to his hometown. He has to grapple with family history, Appalachian values, and the American dream. It stars Amy Adams, Haley Bennett, Frida Pinto, and Glenn Close. Next on the list is a story that I think has the potential to be a tearjerker. It's based on the memoir called 2 Kisses for Maddie. It's the story of a couple who are deeply in love. They are going to have a child whose name is Maddie, and the wife ends up dying unexpectedly just a few hours after giving birth. And the story is about how the husband is raising their daughter. Now the movie is coming out under a different name. It's called Fatherhood, and it is actually expected out in about a year, April of 2021. This is a drama, and is directed by Paul Weitz. He has directed American Pie, About a Boy, Little Fockers, Being Flynn, and Bel Canto. He also directed a number of episodes of the series Mozart in the Jungle. This movie stars Paul Alexander Desiree, Rodney Alexander, Christine Lahn, and Kevin Hart. And based on my research, I am not yet seeing where it will be streaming. If it will be streaming, maybe because it's coming out a year from now, it will actually be able to be seen in the theaters. We'll see. The next movie is called Chaos Walking. This is the first part of a trilogy of the same name, and is based on Patrick Nessis's novel from 2008 called The Knife of Never Letting Go. This is an adventure sci-fi, and it is due out in January of 2021. And according to the Internet Movie Database, here's a summary of the story. A dystopian world where there are no women and all living creatures can hear each other's thoughts in a stream of images, words, and sounds called noise. This is directed by Doug Liman. He is the director of Swingers, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and Edge of Tomorrow. And the movie stars Tom Holland, Mads Mikkelsen, Daisy Ridley, and Nick Jonas. So some more good stuff to look forward to coming out next year. This next one should be a fun one. It is a movie that is called The Witches, based on a book by the same name. It's a classic by Roald Dahl that came from 1983. According to the Internet Movie Database, this is a story that is scary, funny, and imaginative, and is about a 7-year-old boy who has a run-in with some real-life witches. It's an adventure, comedy, and family movie. Based on my research, it looks like this movie is scheduled to come out in October of this year, but it's unclear if that is for certain. This movie is directed by Robert Zemeckis. He's known for directing movies like Death Becomes Her, Forrest Gump, Castaway, The Polar Express, Contact, Beowulf, a lot of big hits. And it has a great cast with Anne Hathaway, Octavia Spencer, Stanley Tucci, and Chris Rock. Next on the list is a remake of Hitchcock's classic, Rebecca, and this is expected out in the fall. There doesn't seem to be a specific date attached to it at this point. And like Hitchcock's version, this version is also based on the novel by Daphne du Maurier, and it is expected out on Netflix. A summary from Netflix is, Rebecca tells the story of a newly married young woman who, on arriving at her husband's imposing family estate on a bleak English coast, finds herself battling the shadow of his dead first wife, the mysterious Rebecca, whose legacy continues to haunt the house. It's considered a drama, mystery, romance, and is being directed by Ben Wheatley. He has directed quite a bit of television, but he's also known for the movies Kill List, Sightseers, A Field in England, and High Rise. And this movie stars Lily James, Armie Hammer, Keely Hawes, Sam Riley, and Bryony Miller, as well as one of my favorites, Kristen Scott Thomas. Number 18 on the list is a film based on the novel by Jojo Moyes called The Last Letter from Your Lover. This came out in 2008. It's a romance novel, and so this movie is a drama and romance. And according to the Internet Movie Database, a young journalist in London becomes obsessed with a series of letters she discovers that recounts an intense star-crossed love affair from the 1960s. It is directed by Augustine Frizzell, and it stars Shailene Woodley, Joe Alwyn, Felicity Jones, and Ben Cross. And this is going to be available on Netflix. There does not seem to be a release date attached to this movie quite yet. And number 20 on my list is a movie based on the book Dragon Rider by Cornelia Funk. This is a children's book that came out in 1997. According to the Internet Movie Database, this has a August 6th scheduled release in Germany. It's unclear when it's going to be released in the United States and on what platform. This is considered an animation, adventure family movie. According to the Internet Movie Database, it is about a young silver dragon who teams up with a mountain spirit and an orphaned boy to go on a journey through the Himalaya, and they are in search of the Rim of Heaven. The director is Tomer Eshed, and it stars Felicity Jones, Freddie Highmore, Thomas Brody Sangster, and Patrick Stewart. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about the action and adventure movies The Old Guard, Spenser Confidential, and Extraction, as well as the 20 new or upcoming movies based on books, comics, or other material. And here's to films offering you inspiration. There's lots to look forward to. Stay safe. This is Elizabeth Aaron saying thank you for listening to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review that really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.